Get started. So today is solving compound inequalities. Tomorrow is solving absolute value inequalities. And you will see between the 2 days how they're similar, but today is just reviewing compound inequalities. These were part of Algebra 1. So if you are looking at this and you're working ahead as we go, that's fine. Just make sure that you're checking things, that you're still getting the answers correct. At the top, compound inequality is defined, or it consists of two inequalities either joined by the word and or the word or. And it does matter which word they are joined by. It changes the solution set depending on what they are joined by. So we're going to look at compound inequalities joined by and first. So if a compound inequality contains the word and, it's true if and only if both inequalities are true. So a solution would have to fit both inequalities in the compound inequality. And the graph is what's called the intersection of the solution sets of the two inequalities. And what that really means is it's where the two inequalities, their graphs would overlap, is how I think of it. So you're only shading the values on the number line that the two inequalities would share, in a sense. So what I have on here, just to give you the idea of how a compound inequality graph looks when it's joined by and, I have two inequalities. We'll look at their graphs separately. And then if they were part of a compound inequality joined by and, how that graph would look different. So just as a review, well, more review, we reviewed this on Friday, but how would you graph the inequality x is greater than or equal to -3 on a number line? What would that look like? John? Yes. Everything greater than -3 is shaded, so it would be shaded to the right in that case. So then for the next one, x is less than 2. Yes. So when it has the or equal to, make sure you're putting a dot. That means that value itself is included. If it doesn't have the or equal to, it's a circle. That value is not included. So if you were to kind of merge these two graphs together and only pay attention to what is shaded in by both graphs, what the compound inequality graph would look like is one endpoint would be at -3, so you'd have a dot. The other endpoint is at 2, it'd be a circle, and they are both shaded. Both graphs are shaded for the values in between those two values. So notice anything less than -3 was only shaded by one of the graphs. Anything greater than 2 was only shaded by 1. So those are not part of the solution set of the compound inequality. It's just in between. And compound inequalities joined by and, their graphs typically look like this. It's typically two endpoints and it's shaded in between. If you did have two graphs, say you had two inequalities and you graphed them both on a number line and they were shaded opposite directions, but they were supposed to be joined by and, so they never overlap, it is possible to have no solution. That would be a case where you have no solution. Another way of writing this compound inequality, so if it's joined by and specifically, there's a shorthand way to write it, if you will, or an alternative way to write it. I'll write it and then I'll explain it. So it would look like this. So -3 is less than or equal to x is less than 2. So it's kind of merging the two inequalities together and not having a word in between them. And this can only be done if they're joined by and. So now I'll explain how to get from this notation to this one. If you look at that first inequality and you flipped it around, so you flipped everything including the inequality sign, it would be -3 is less than or equal to x. And now if you put that together with x is less than 2, if you kind of merge those two x's, you'll see the -3 is less than or equal to x here and the x is less than 2 there. So that's how it's put together. Both forms mean the same thing, though. They both mean that x is greater than or equal to -3 and less than 2 in this case. And then I also want to look at the interval notation, so the notation we learned Friday with the parentheses and the brackets. In this case, infinity is not needed either positive or negative infinity, because notice the graph of our solution set does not extend all the way in either direction. We have two endpoints, -3 and 2. So this solution set would be the values from -3 up to 2. And then because -3 is included and it's a dot on the number line, do we use a parenthesis or a bracket? It's a bracket, yeah. If it's a dot, if it's included, it's a bracket. And then the 2 is a open circle, not included, so it would be a parenthesis on that side. So this is the interval notation for that inequality. On your assignment, because it's out of the book, make sure it's not going to say in the direction. So this is like Friday. I highly encourage you to not only practice the set builder notation, but also practice the interval notation, and I'll have those answers on the board again tomorrow for you to check, just so you get that practice since it will be on your test. But we'll go ahead and look at example 1. So when you are given an inequality in this form, notice it's not joined by and or. This is always then a compound inequality where it's joined by and, even though and isn't written there. So we're going to solve this compound inequality and graph the solution set. There's two ways you can solve this. One way would be to leave it written as it is, and the other way would be to rewrite it. So I'm just going to show off to the side here, because I'm going to show you solving it as it is, but if you are one that likes to rewrite it, that's fine. If you were to rewrite this so that it's two separate inequalities joined by and, this is how you do it. The first inequality would be everything up until that second inequality symbol, so it'd be leaving off the less than or equal to 23. This would be the first inequality. So 8 is less than 3y minus 7. And then I'm going to write and in the middle. And then the second inequality would be covering up everything before and including the first inequality symbol. So it'd be the middle, 3y minus 7 is less than or equal to 23. So if this makes more sense to you to see two separate inequalities joined by and in the middle, that's fine. You can write it that way. And then just solve each inequality separately for y, and then join them together with the word and. That would be one way to solve it. Otherwise, you can leave it exactly the way it is written and just solve it this way. And your goal is to get the variable y by itself in the middle. So if I wanted to get y by itself, I have to get rid of the 3 and the minus 7. So I would want to get rid of the minus 7 first by adding 7. But I not only need to add 7 to the middle, I have to add it to both sides. So I have to add it to the 23 on the right side and to the 8 on the left side. So it cancels out in the middle. 8 plus 7 is 15. Bring down the less than symbol. 3y is less than or equal to 23 plus 7 is 30. And then the last step to get y by itself in the middle, divide by 3. And then I have to divide the two sides by 3 as well. So 5 is less than y is less than or equal to 10. So this is your answer. You can add, or to do the set builder notation with this, just like we did Friday, I typically just add the set builder notation around it. So in front, I would have a brace, define the variable y, vertical line for such that. I already have my compound inequality, and then close the braces. So this would be set builder notation. What I want to show you, though, is if I were to separate this, and this is how your solution would look if you solved it over here. So here's one inequality. Y is, I'll write it this way. 5 is less than y before I start to switch it around. And then and the second inequality is y is less than or equal to 10. And then if I flip this back around, so my solution is really y is greater than 5 and y is less than or equal to 10. So your solution would just look like this, already separated if you solved it this way, and it's fine to leave it written that way, as two separate inequalities joined by and. But you don't have to write both. Either have the combined compound inequality or have it written separately with and in the middle. Do you have a question, Andrew? Into this? Yes. So if you solved this, this is actually what your solution would look like. And then if you took this and just merged it to write it that way, that'd be fine. Yep. And sometimes problems are given to you already separated, joined by and. So I'm just kind of showing you both. And it doesn't matter to me which form you write it in. I'd say most often you're going to see this form. So it's good to understand what it means. But if you want to separate it yourself, that's okay. All right, so that's the solution in Set Builder. The graph really quickly. I'm just going to put the graph over here. I don't really have room on the other side of the line that I drew. So when you're graphing these yourself, all I need to see is that you have your two endpoints on the number line. I don't need to see numbers in between or some super detailed number line. So I would just, in this case, need to see 5 and 10. And then just make sure that the lower number is on the left of your number line. And then what this is showing is because of the less than symbol here, which if we had it flipped around like I did here, it's really greater than. But I would need an open circle on the 5. With the less than or equal to symbol for the 10, I need a dot on the 10. And this notation is really showing that y is in between the two values, so I'm only shading in between. But what I see a lot of students do is because this symbol is less than the way you're looking at it, students like to shade everything to the left. Do not shade over here because this piece really means how I wrote it here. Y is greater than 5. So it's only shaded in between those two values. Circle on 5, dot on 10, shaded in the middle. And the last part, the interval notation. So I have my two endpoints. My solutions range from 5 to 10. I have an open circle on 5. It's not included, so I should have a parenthesis there. And then a closed dot on 10. It is included, so a bracket on the 10. And that would be the interval notation. Okay, any questions on that?